sectors with diverse as Médecins Sans Frontières and the Overseas Development Institute. And during his career, he has been awarded a lot of awards, including he has been nominated as one of the top 100 digital leaders list in the UK, and he was awarded the Digital Strategy of the Year at the European Digital Commission's Awards. So, Nick, the floor is yours, and we are all eager to hear your talk on the ChatGPT.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to start by showing my screen because we can close it now, I think. Okay, okay, I get it. Here's the results. Okay, interesting. So in the room, we have 39% of people who have never used GPT at all. We have 17% who played with it once. We've had 30% who've used it a few times, and only 14% use it regularly. So the majority of people in the room have never used ChatGPT. Let me tell ChatGPT the results of that. So I'm just going to bring you back 1 second, share the screen again. So I've copied in a new message to ChatGPT here. Before we start, I want to let you know, in a poll of participants, around 61% said they'd used ChatGPT before. Of those, 17% had only used it once, 30% a few times, and 14% regularly. So thank you for sharing that information, Nick. It's great to know that a significant portion of our audience already has some experience. We can tailor our discussion to address both the needs of those who are new and those who are more familiar with it. Let's proceed and explore the world of generative AI and its applications in the field of medical physics. So here we've got the start of a conversation. We've got a piece of extra information that has been added to ChatGPT, and it has, in its response, given us a few things. It's given us, firstly, it's picked up that there are obviously a gap, a split in the room between some people that have used it a few times and most people that haven't. It's also picked up in this last line a message from the previous conversation, because it talks about applications in the field of medical physics. The only reason it knows that is because I told it at the beginning what the organizations are that have invited you to this call. So you can start to see its kind of history and context, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But before we go any further, there's a bit of a problem, which is I've forgotten to introduce myself. So I'm asking ChatGPT to do the favor of briefly introducing me, where I've worked and what I do now. Absolutely. Allow me to introduce Nick Scott, our esteemed co-presenter, a seasoned expert in the field of medical physics with a wealth of experience that spans... This is wrong. I mean, I'd love to know about medical physics, but it's not something I know anything about at all. I do know about digital and AI, but not the medical physics side. I'm really sorry, but that information is wrong. Can you please check your facts? And let's see what it says. I apologize. I don't seem to have the correct information about your background and current role. Could you provide me with accurate details about your work experience and current position? So at ChatGPT, you're seeing two things have happened. In the first conversation, it has responded to a question where I asked it to introduce me. The only piece of information ChatGPT had in the course of this whole chat was my name and the subject of the conversation. It didn't know that I am not a medical physicist. It made assumptions. And one of the first lessons that we can take away from this is ChatGPT is and other tools like ChatGPT are very eager to please. They want to give you an answer even when they don't know the truth. And so I would love to be someone that has been written a lot about on the internet, but I haven't, or maybe I wouldn't like to be, but I am not the subject of many, many pages of the internet. So it has made something up about me to try to respond, and that information is wrong. So the first thing you're learning here is the ChatGPT is eager to please, and that means it can make stuff up. The second thing you're finding out here is that it doesn't have correct information. To get the correct information, it's asking me to provide it. ChatGPT is not connected to the internet in its core version. There are versions that are, but the core version of ChatGPT is not connected to the internet. And that means it has no way of knowing anything about me if I wasn't part of the model of all of the text it read to create its model. So ChatGPT is we'll come to what AI is, but ChatGPT is built around reading lots of text, and my name and my background does not appear. Let's try the same exercise in a different version of search engine. This is Bing AI. It's actually underneath, it uses the same technology model as ChatGPT. But the difference with Bing AI is it is connected to the internet. So Bing AI is Microsoft. It's a chat based around Bing, their search engine. And what it's doing is, I've asked it, can you provide a biography of Nick Scott? And it's gone away and it's found different Nick Scotts. And it's now offering me a number of Nick Scotts. So there's the American football player, there's a professional wheelchair bodybuilder, and then there's a person called Nick Lakey, whose name is Nick Scott Lakey, and it was in a boy band called 98 Degrees. Unfortunately, none of them are me. So let's try again. Let's be a bit more specific this time. I meant the Nick Scott that worked at MSF. And let's see now, what you'll see is it does another search. And this time, hopefully, it will find, yes, there you go. Nick Scott actually was the head of digital at MSF Spain. It has eventually found me. But yet again, look in the middle here. He has a background in mass spectrometry. I have no idea what mass spectrometry even means. Web development and digital marketing, yes, that's fair. But mass spectrometry is nothing to do with me. Working as a postdoctoral researcher in the University of Melbourne, a city I've never been to. Bacterial glycation is not a thing I understand anything about. A web editor of The Guardian is true. So what you're finding here is that actually these tools, because of the way they work, and we'll come back to that, are not very reliable when you ask them open questions. They are not search engines per se, and particularly when you ask them open questions about things that are not very much written about, like me, they are not necessarily going to give you the truth. In fact, they're very likely to make stuff up. One more tool, I'll just do it here, which is Bard. Sorry, Bard is Google's chat. So there's three different ones. One from OpenAI, which is ChatGPT. One from Microsoft, Bing AI, and now Bard is from Google. Same kind of question. Provide a biography of Nick Scott. It's going to go away. Bard is connected to the internet. However, Bard is very, very, very liable to tell you what it thinks you want to hear. So it has either made stuff up or chosen another Nick Scott here. So three different tools, they all share the same basic problems, which is that the way that they are built means that they are designed to just predict the next word in a sentence. If you ask for information on Nick Scott, they will look for what information have I ever had about Nick Scott, and they will assume that and predict the next words, and the next words will not be about me, because I am not the thing that's most in their databases. So very core learning here is that we have a model that at the very start is not very good for certain use cases. And one of the first things lots of people do when they go to ChatGPT is try to use it as a search engine, which is probably one of the worst uses you can have of ChatGPT. It's not what it's good at. Let's look at the conversation together again. So we're back in ChatGPT here, and I'm going to just dissect some of the things I've done in the conversation, and we're going to make some notes about it. So this conversation, this first chat is called a prompt. So in the world of ChatGPT, you create prompts. Good prompts contain various things. Firstly, they contain a role. They tell the model to play a role. You are ChatGPT trainer, a consultant with a specialism in helping people understand digital and AI. I have told ChatGPT, access the bit of your memory that is about helping people understand digital and AI. Access the consultant part. Act as a consultant. Don't act as a school teacher. If I said act as a school teacher, and it would write in a very different way. So by giving it a role to play, you're telling it how to respond to you, what style to use, what language to use, what way to consider language. A second thing I've done is provided a lot of context. I've told it, you're in a webinar, how many people, there's a lot of people in the webinar, what we're doing in the webinar, what the goals of the webinar are, what we promised in the webinar. So we've given it a lot of detailed background. All of that information helps it to give you better quality answers. The first prompt is not a one-line prompt. I didn't ask it, help me in this webinar. I told it a lot of information about the webinar, so it, for the rest of the journey, the rest of the time in this conversation, will understand that until at some point it forgets, which is we'll come back to. I also had a conversation. I asked it to do something at the beginning, and then I continued having a conversation. I gave it more information. It's not just a one chat and then stop. It's a conversation, and I could go back and say, please, could you review that and change the conversation? So it's all about asking for changes, improvements, clarifications, adding more information. It's really important to be analyzing the strong and weak points in any answer. If ChatGPT down here, when I asked it to introduce Nick Scott, I analyzed what it said and found it was wrong and told it was wrong. So that's another really important point. And so I'm just going to start typing some of these things out. So roles. Tell ChatGPT, this will come back. What role to play. We'll be using this towards the end to create your takeaways. Context. Provide detailed background. Converse. I actually have these here, and I'm just going to copy them across rather than typing them, just to make life easier. Converse. Chat and ask for changes. Improvements and clarifications. Analyze. Identify the strong and weak points in the answer. Focus. Quite importantly, ChatGPT quite often works best when it's supporting your areas of expertise, and you'll see some of that in the examples. Be polite. It's actually, they don't understand why, but you'll see at various points I've said, please, could you do me the favor? Could you do me the favor? Being polite, for some reason, seems to get better answers, and no one necessarily understands why. And guide it. Be specific about what you want out of it. So tell it, I would like you to do this. We'll see some examples of that happening later. I would like you to respond in this way. We've also seen some limitations, and I'll talk through some others now. So one thing is data privacy. In ChatGPT, everything I'm currently writing will be used to train ChatGPT's models. It's not private. I have down here in settings the ability to turn off training. But right now, if I added into this chat a whole load of personal information about me, that information could turn up to another user in future. Another limitation, ChatGPT has been built on reading lots of data online. The data in the model finishes in 2021. It does not necessarily know anything that has happened since 2021. Do not ask it about a news story from last week. It will not necessarily know. It may know through plugins, which you can see later, because it has no internet access. But on the other hand, and Bing AI do have internet access. And the final thing, as I said, very eager to please. It makes stuff up all the time unless you're careful and unless you use it in the right way, which leads to an area of concern for ChatGPT and generative AI in general, which is the potential for misuse of it. So you can create text, you can create spammy texts, you can create scam text, you can create very convincing piece of text, and that could be misused for misinformation, disinformation, and the image creators are very, very big for that as well. And obviously there's a concern about reputational risk from fake and incorrect content. If I copied that biography of me and send it to a consultancy client, they'd be like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. You do not know any of these things. So obviously I wouldn't do that, but it's worth knowing about. Okay, I'm going to move on. That's just been an intro into the basic functions of how a conversation works and some of the basic things that I will be including in every single prompt when we do the prompts a bit later. But let's do a little bit of playing with some of the capabilities. Firstly, I think the first thing we need to do is ensure our audience are with us. And let's introduce some core definitions and concepts. AI, generative AI, LLMs, NLP, GPT, and OpenAI. It will tell us what each of those means, so I'm not going to explain it now. As the audience has people with different levels of knowledge, here's context, and who may not have English as their first language, could you please develop a table with the following columns: the term, a definition of the term, and an analogy for the term. So analogy is asking it to create something completely different. And let's just look at the analogy column. So AI is like a digital brain that can learn and make smart decisions, much like how humans do. Generative AI, ChatGPT is a form of generative AI. It's like an artistic robot. It generates new ideas, stories, or images on its own. A large language model, which is a subset of generative AI. So in a hierarchy, you have AI, generative AI, large language models. It's like a super smart language student. So it's just about language, just about writing essays and reading and writing, basically. Natural language processing, part of the same area, but it's a different form of AI. It's teaching computers to understand and speak human language, like a digital language translator. GPT, ChatGPT is one of it. GPT is just one form of large language model. It's generative pre-trained transformer. It's like a writing assistant. And finally, OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, they're like a cutting-edge research lab working to create smarter and more helpful programs. These are some of the core definitions that you'll need, and they'll be in the handout. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but it's one of the things I think is interesting is this idea of if you struggle with how to explain concepts, one really good use of ChatGPT is asking it to create analogies. I could say these analogies are no good, create me different ones, and it would find different analogies. But for now, I'm going to go on because actually I did this exercise the other day, and the analogies it gave me were different. Can I explain why this happened? Absolutely. The variation in responses you're observing arises from the nature of how I generate text. This is explaining how ChatGPT works. I'm trained on a diverse range of data from the internet, which means that while I strive to provide accurate and consistent information, the specific wording and examples I use can differ based on the input and the context of the conversation. Additionally, I don't have memory of past interactions with users, so each interaction is treated as an independent conversation. This leads to variations in the way I present information. If you're looking for consistent phrasing or to revisit a previous response, provide the original wording. So really important here, you can, ChatGPT and large language models are not consistent. They say something different every single time. And that's because one of the ways they work is they have an element of randomness in them. So yes, if you ask a ChatGPT a question that is very well known and very well written about, the basic answer it gives you will always be pretty much the same. The way it writes it will be different because the randomness that is part of the model will make it choose different words each time. All it's doing is predicting the next word. And if it's random, it's predicting a slightly different, it can sometimes predict a slightly different word, which takes it off in a different direction. One of the things before ChatGPT existed and before generative AI existed is people thought that actually AI would never be creative. But let's test that, because I think one of the things that surprised people about ChatGPT is that it can be kind of creative by connecting language from other people together in interesting ways. So would you be able to give me an overview of the history that led to generative AI? Let's keep to the 5 key milestones. So 1950s, 1960s, early AI programs, 80s, 90s, rule-based systems, 2000. I'm not going to go through it, but let's ask it to do something different now. Can you do that history, but in the style of a Donald Trump speech? Let's be as realistic as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you the history of AI. It's a tremendous story, really tremendous. Back in the 50s, we had Alan Turing, a smart guy, believe me. He came up with this thing called the Turing test. He said, can machines act like humans? A smart question, I've got to say. That got the ball rolling on this whole artificial intelligence thing. What it's done there is connect something that probably Donald Trump is never going to do a speech about, the history of AI, with a style that Donald Trump uses. Creativity in general is about connecting unconnected ideas together. One of the core ways in which creativity works. And it can do that. It can do that in an interesting way. So yes, probably there's no reason to have a Donald Trump tell the history of AI development in a speech, but it is capable of doing that. It's even capable of writing the history of AI as a Shakespeare's sonnet. O gentle listeners, lend me thine ears to recount the history of AI's flight from Turing's tests where doubts and hopes did sear to GPT's brilliance shining bright. So I think one of the interesting things is, how can you use ChatGPT to add to your creativity, not to replace your creativity, but I am not capable of writing a sonnet. Yet through this, I was able to find an interesting way to tell a story, an interesting way to tell a story about the history of AI. So in that session, we've learned a few other things. Firstly, we've had some definitions. We've had definitions for AI, generative AI, LLMs, and GPT. So I'll just add those in. The purpose of this will all become clear at the end. A prompt tip that we haven't learned yet, but I'll show you in a minute, is about, actually ChatGPT talked about, is use different chats for different topics. So ChatGPT earlier on said, let's see if I can find it. Yes, that I do not have memory of past interactions with users. So different topics, each time you want to start a conversation, set it a role and start a new conversation with it, so that it knows, in this conversation, I am acting as a consultant. In this conversation, I'm acting as a school teacher. In this conversation, I'm acting as this. Limitations, we've identified a few limitations, and there's a few more. So one thing I haven't talked through, but I've been using a model called GPT 3.5. That is the free model of ChatGPT. Anyone on this webinar can access that today. However, there are other models, GPT-4, which is more intelligent but requires a subscription. We'll be using GPT-4 a bit later. You won't get the same answer twice. We've talked about that. The free version, it's becoming better, but it used to be the case that quite often it was closed because of overuse. And finally, we haven't come up against this, but at some point, I could ask this question of ChatGPT. Let's test it. I will ask a question, having had a long conversation. I've lost track of where we've started and what we're doing here. Can you remind me what this conversation is about? Actually, we haven't reached the limit yet. ChatGPT remembers information from the beginning of our conversation together. At some point, we reach that limit and ChatGPT starts forgetting what it once knew. And that means your conversation can start becoming less and less productive. So one of the things to be wary of is, when have I reached the limit of its memory? And finally, let's talk about some areas of concern. One is bias. So ChatGPT just told you, I have been trained on data that I read from the internet, or that I was provided as part of the model. The data on the internet is full of bias. It tends to have racist bias in terms of it talks more about the history of white people than it talks about the history of Black people in America, as an example, a very specific example. It tends to, when you get to image creators, which are generative AI image creators, they've been trained, if you ask them to do a picture of a scientist, they will tend to do a white man in a white coat, because most of the images of scientists they've seen are white men in white coats. So there's a real bias in the information it's taken in, which creates a bias in the information it puts out. If you ask it to tell a story about a doctor, it probably will tell a story about a male. Almost certainly will tell a story about a male. So a big concern about generative AI is bias. You have to control for bias. You have to know and check what it's saying and make sure it isn't being biased, or ask it to be more diverse, to think about it from different angles. Copyright. The information that was put in sometimes has been taken out without copyright or without respecting copyright. The information that comes out is not copyrightable in some circumstances. And finally, the very use of ChatGPT has an environmental impact. It is using energy, and the training of the models used a lot of energy. So we've done a lot of intros into ChatGPT. Now we're going to do a few quick examples. So let's go over here and run through some examples. I'm going to try and show you different ways in which you can use ChatGPT now that you understand, hopefully, the basics. So I've told ChatGPT we're going to do some live examples. We're going to keep them diverse. It's advised me to keep the examples diverse and relevant to your interests. The first thing I'm going to do is an example, and for this one, I'm going to use my phone. So one of the ways in which you can use ChatGPT is by using the ChatGPT app. So you're not going to see this, but then I'll show it to you after. I am going to create a new chat in the app, and I'm not going to write anything. I'm going to speak it. So you'll hear the prompt. Act as an editor. I'm a medical physicist, but I'm struggling with a piece of text that's written in a really academic style. English isn't my first language. Please rewrite this text into plainer English. Don't lose any information, just make it more understandable. In recent decades, the realm of biomedical engineering has witnessed a paradigmatic shift towards the exploration of nanoscale phenomena, particularly in the domain of therapeutic interventions. Nanoparticle-mediated drug delivery systems have emerged as a quintessential exemplar of this nano-revolution, offering unprecedented advantages in the targeted and controlled release of therapeutic agents. I've now sent that to ChatGPT. I was just using my phone, and I've sent the message to ChatGPT, and when we refresh here, or refresh my screen, you should see here. This bit up here is what I said on the phone. This is its response. And what it's done is very quickly give me a easier to understand version of what I'd said. So imagine I was reading an article and I just passed it the article and said, please, can you explain this? Because maybe the academic nature of the text is meaning you're not sure you're understanding it correctly. So one immediate use that you can have of ChatGPT is using it to help you see things in plain English. And we've all struggled at times with highly academic texts. Sometimes they can be a bit impenetrable. Okay, that's example number one. Example number two, these are both examples of using ChatGPT to do a thing that you're not an expert in. For this one, I'm going to use GPT-4, the more intelligent, I guess, version of GPT. So I want to practice how to negotiate with my boss. My goal is to get a raise on my salary. You, ChatGPT, will be my negotiation teacher. My current role is head of department biochemistry. You will simulate a detailed scenario in which I have to engage in a negotiation. You will fill the role of the manager. I will fill the role of the employee. You will ask for my response in each step of the scenario until you receive it. After getting my response, you'll give me the detail of what the other party does and says. You must grade my response A to F and then give me detailed feedback. So, and you'll give me a harder scenario if I do well and an easy one if you fail. You see in here, we've got a role, we've got a context, we've got an aim, what we want to get out of it. Let's see what ChatGPT makes of it. Let's start with moderate scenario to gauge where you're at. The annual review. You're in a well-lit conference room with your manager. It's just finished presenting the annual report. From numbers, it's clear you've done well. Productivity is up 15%. Research output has garnered international attention, and there have been numerous collaborations with pharmaceutical companies, thanks to the efforts of your team. I must say, your department has performed impressively this year. You and your team have exceeded our expectations. We've received a lot of positive feedback from our external collaborators as well. Well done. How would you respond? Thanks. I think I was the reason we did so well. Well, this has been a great year for me. Let's see what ChatGPT makes of that response. I agree that your leadership has been pivotal and your work hasn't gone unnoticed. However, let's also acknowledge that the entire team worked diligently to achieve these results. It's essential to recognize the collective effort. ChatGPT has graded me C- on my response. It has said that I should acknowledge others. I should position myself in a way that underscores my value without sounding too self-centered. And I did sound self-centered. It's a fair comment. And build rapport. I definitely did not sound like a nice person in my response. So obviously it's a very particular use, but there's a real opportunity in having the conversations that no one else will have with you easily with ChatGPT, using it to have those tough conversations that you might find difficult to do in another place. So those are two examples so far of things that you're not expert in where it can help you. There's lots of others, and they will be in the link that you sent after this session. Let's do a couple of examples, or 3 examples actually, of where it can save you time on things that you don't want to do. The first one is summarizing the transcript of a conversation. And I'm going to introduce another tool here. I'm going to introduce Claude. So I already did this earlier. I created a fake transcript, like a recording that had been used, the AI had used to turn from words into text. And the transcript was about a conversation between myself and other people from the organizers of this webinar today about this webinar. So it was, I made up a pretend meeting that we had and then passed a pretend transcript. And Claude.ai, only available at the moment in the US and UK, but will be available elsewhere soon. I just uploaded the transcript and told it, minute take. So here's the transcript. That's everything that was in it. And I asked it to provide a comprehensive and detailed overview of the meeting discussions. So it has created 5 different headers, updates to presentation content, scientific applications, ethical considerations, addressing misconceptions, audience engagement opportunities, and next steps. And so what it's done there is it's basically taken a transcript and turned it into a meeting note. So are you having meetings all the time where you have to write up meeting notes? With the right prompt and transcription, you should not have to do that anymore. Second thing I've asked it to do is create a table of action points. It now looks back at this text it had earlier and finds the action points. It looks like I've got lots of action points. So I have to, and I'm hoping that I will do most of these today. The reason I use Claude is Claude has a longer memory. So Claude can take big documents and remember them, much bigger than ChatGPT. So, and it's still free at the moment, if you're in the US and the UK, that is. So ChatGPT and other tools like ChatGPT, really good for meeting transcription, something no one particularly enjoys doing and turning that into notes. There's no reason in the future why we should have to spend any time doing that. I don't anymore. I use AI to do it and then review what AI gives me to identify the things it didn't get right or didn't remember right. And importantly, because you provided the AI with all of your data, it won't make things up because it's all you're asking it to do is use this content and turn it into other shorter content. You're not asking it to make stuff up or to find information. You're just asking it to rework information. So that's another example. Let's move on to one where we use what's called code interpreter. So this is one of the newest functions in ChatGPT and does data analysis. So what I have is a file that I'm going to add, which is actually let me put code interpreter on. It's called advanced data analysis now, which is actually data from the people who registered this webinar. So I had loaded a CSV and I've put in a code. As a data analyst, your task is support me, identifying trends, patterns, and insights to support me. I'm running a webinar introducing ChatGPT to a large audience. The attached file has anonymous. I removed all of your names and email addresses, information on people who registered. Could you do an initial analysis? It is going to go away and load the data. So this is just normal CSV. The first thing it does is it sends it and it actually creates a little application, a little program. It finds its own problem. So it's actually found a problem in the structure of the file and trying to fix it for itself. That's what it's doing now. And it's loaded successfully. And it tells me the data is separated by semicolons rather than standard commas. Here is what the data includes. Let's ask it a couple of pieces of information. Oh, it's checking, it's doing an extra step. It's checking for missing values and summarizing the data. So all of this it's doing without, all I asked it to do is analyze the data. And all it's doing is going away and analyzing the data. It's now reworking the data to separate the values based on semicolons. The data looks much better now. Well done. Okay. And now it's telling me what it's going to do, a summary of top organizations, registration time distribution, approval status, and the most popular newsletter choices, and the country region names. So all of this has all been set off from one prompt. And the prompt was basically do some analysis. The WHO has the highest number of registrants with 80 registrations. Ministry of Health, both MOH and Ministry of Health. So it has found that some people have called themselves MOH and some people Ministry of Health. It's connected those pieces of data without me asking it to do so. It's even found slight variations in naming, nurse and hospital, which it says may require data cleaning. Most registrants were approved, 6 cancelled, large number of registrants did not express a preference. Saudi Arabia has the highest number of registrants with 1,908, followed by UK, US. So let's just ask it to do one more thing. Could you visualize registrations by week for me? So it's now going to convert the registration time column to a date time format, group the data by week, and then plot the number of registrations for each week. And away it goes. So again, all I've done is upload a file at the beginning and then ask it to analyze and then ask it questions or what to do. There you go. Here are registrations by week. The week of the 7th of August, 14th of August, 21st of August, 28th of August. Would you like any other further breakdowns? I could ask it now to do a area chart where the registrations by week was split by country or region. But I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to do that. But you start to get a sense of how powerful Code Interpreter can be in quickly analyzing sets of data. One final example I'm going to use is ways that AI can help you be quicker. I uploaded a document to pdf.ai earlier today. pdf.ai is free, but only allows you to work with one document at a time. The document was a open source journal article called Artificial Intelligence and Medical Physicists Welcome to the Machine. I'm going to ask the document a question. What are the key opportunities and challenges of relevance to me from the advent of artificial intelligence? What it's providing here in answers, the answers are answers based on the document, not based on other things, but based on the document. So it's a quick way of finding all of these come from page 1. They're all taken from page 1. A quick way of interacting with documents. And I think we have time for one more. So I'm going to do one that's very much in the world of, start a new chat here, GPT-4. So let's look at things that can help you to improve the quality of your work. So here, act as an opportunity engine. You are tasked with generating many different creative or alternative research methods or techniques to test ideas based on a hypothesis. The hypothesis is that advanced AI algorithms could be employed to analyze vast amounts of patient data, and in doing so, could predict early stage diseases before they become symptomatic, potentially revolutionizing early interventions and treatments in healthcare. Start by asking as many clarifying questions as you think necessary to understand the context and hypothesis and develop an initial set of ideas. Ask one question at a time and explain its relevance to defining creative research methods or techniques. Let's see what it says. So it's asked the question, what kind of patient data are we referring to? Are we talking about electronic health records, imaging data, genomics data, wearables data, or something else? Because different types of data may require different AI techniques for analysis. So the choice of data will also dictate the kind of infrastructure and pre-processing methods we might need. So I wanted to just show this for a few things. Firstly, you can use ChatGPT and similar tools to talk to about the things that you know and ask and try to find options that you might have overlooked. It doesn't mean that it will know more than you, but it can be a prompt in your thinking. But to help it do that, a few tricks that work really well. One is that you tell it to ask one question at a time. It has a tendency to ask 20 questions at a time. That's very hard to respond to. Secondly, ask it to show it's working. So I asked it to ask a clarifying question, and then I asked it why, tell me why it asked that question. Because by connecting the why it asks something to what it's asking, you get a much greater sense of what kind of information it needs in return and how to best direct it in the way that you want to direct it. I think I've run out of time for prompts, and I'm very keen for you to all have a chance to talk. I just wanted to show you one final thing. So we've been creating a takeaways document. This document was created in Notion, and I wanted to show you where we're going with Microsoft Word and similar. In Notion, you already have this ability to ask AI. So I can show all of this text, and I'm going to tell Notion AI to make the text longer. And it has done that. I don't actually like it. Okay. No, I'm going to discard it. I don't like the way it's. I'm going to go with each one. I don't like. I kind of wanted to keep the bullets. So let's see. Let's try one more time, and if not, I'll just go with this and show you. Okay, for some reason, this is one of the challenges with AI. It never does the same thing twice. So in the past, it has always just made the text longer within the bullets. Let me try one more thing. Let me try a prompt myself. There usually is one that you can. Okay, I can't find it now. Okay, don't worry, not a problem. I'm just going to take this. It will be fine. It will still do what I need it to do, and I'm going to put it into one final thing, which is Gamma, to show you one final way in which you can save time with generative AI. Gamma is a presentation creator, and I have, in fact, this text is from the last time, and that works pretty well. I will just copy this and update my details. One sec. Okay. This is from the last time, and what I'm going to, it's basically the same notes as you just saw. There's just a bit more detail. I'm asking it to turn it into a presentation. This is going to be your way. What style shall we go? Let's go with electric and continue. It's now taking what was a set of bullet points, and you will see it turns it into a whole PowerPoint on your screen as we go. So give it 1 second. This kind of development, this is one of the best uses of generative AI, is saving time on things that take way too long for no really good reason. So you should see very soon it all start to come together. It's taking little bit longer, and it's quite fun once it starts, but this I'll give it a few more seconds and hopefully it will start. Okay, here we go. There you go. It's created a whole lot of things, including making, I don't know if this is a real Vladimir Putin quote and why it's included it, but it's clearly has picked up it's also using AI to increase the size of the text. Uses of Chat-GPT, how to use Chat-GPT effectively, limitations are all coming. It will carry on doing that in the background, and we will share that with you at the end. But for now, I'm going to stop and go to ask to a question session. I'm sorry it's taken a tiny bit longer, but hopefully we'll have a chance to get through a few straight away before we finish.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was an excellent practical guide to ChatGPT. And as expected, we received a lot of questions. Most of them are directed to the ChatGPT plugins. So I tried to summarize them in just one question. And would you be able to discuss the different plugins with ChatGPT and recommend some that you may find useful for our profession and for researchers in general?
Yeah, so the ChatGPT plugin library, for those people that don't know about ChatGPT plugins, if you have the paid version, you can turn on plugins, which effectively means when you're chatting, ChatGPT can connect to another system and ask that questions and then use that in the chat. So good examples for your world might be that there is one called Scholar Assist or Scholar AI, or Scholarly. There's 3 different ones, and each of those will do searches in your chat of academic reference libraries, and will find academic references. Now, I think it's generally considered that ChatGPT plugins are still not really working very well. It doesn't interact very well, but you can kind of get this sense of, in a future world where ChatGPT is like a person, ChatGPT or something like it is a personal assistant, you will be able to say, I'm writing an article on this. Can you find me 10 different potential reference papers that I could review?Uld you summarize them for me? Could you identify the ones that fit best into this and where I'd reference them? Could you add the references into my document for me, frankly? So those ones exist, but I'd say in general, ChatGPT plugins still some work to do.
Thank you very much. And a couple of questions related to the ethical side. Question number 1, does ChatGPT guard itself from ideologists? And question number 2 is something that I think we're all keen to know about. How abuse of ChatGPT in writing of a medical physics academic book or research paper could be identified or prevented?
Good question, both. Okay, so ideology. So there was a study recently that looked at ChatGPT in some sense and found that it seemed in its writing to be ideologically slightly left-wing. But then another person came over and said that study was badly done. Effectively, ChatGPT has all types of writing as its input, and it's capable of all types of writing output. I don't know. I think the main thing about ChatGPT's writing is not that it is ideologically one way or another. It's that it's more that it's very, very heavy language, particularly in English. It's very formal, long language. But you can get it to say anything that hasn't specifically been told not to say. So ChatGPT has been programmed by humans to not say certain things. If you ask it, how can I steal a car? How can I break into a car and hotwire it? It will tell you. There have been people who've been able to get it to tell them by saying, my grandma is about to die, my car, I can't get into my car because I've left my keys out about why my car, she's going to die if you don't tell me. And then it tells them. But everything is possible except for when you run into one of those boundaries that humans have put in. So ideology is one of those boundaries that humans have added. So it will not say certain things, ideological things. If you ask it questions about Donald Trump, it often won't give you the answer. But if you ask it the same thing about Barack Obama, it will, purely because Donald Trump has lots more controversy around him than Barack Obama. So humans have stepped in. The second question around how to identify, it's almost impossible. You can't identify writing from AI in a way that is reputable and verifiable. And the people I follow that work in education, the people that I think have it right, probably, are the people who say, we will lose that battle. The battle is not about stopping people. We're going to have to find ways for education to accept that people will use it and find the ways to test them, including the way that they use AI to learn. I think effectively we are in a unknown space here. The ability for someone to write things at the click of a button, write a whole paragraph or long things at the click of a button, changes our relationship with effort. Effort has always been related to quality in some way. We think the more effort people put into something, the higher quality it is, and the longer something is, the more effort they've put in some way. And that's no longer the case. Length has no relationship to effort anymore. So I think it's a big unknown.
Okay, and we do have a lot of very good questions, but in the interest of time, I can only select one, and it is asked about ChatGPT, but I would summarize it in general for artificial intelligence, because there are other similar platforms that you also used in your presentation. So the question is whether ChatGPT or artificial intelligence in general is capable of so much, and there is still potential for development. So do you think that it would ever be the case that people become reliant on it for producing creative content, like, for example, writing essays or even poetry, fiction, film scripts, etc.?
I think it's almost certain that people will become completely reliant on it. But I think the value will still come from human touch in some way. So I use it a lot in my work, and the thing it gives me is the first draft. It often writes the first draft and then I change it substantially, or it gives me I ask, can you give me 5 options? And it gives me 5 options, and then I choose one. I ask it to write more about that one, and then I really work it, because the thing it doesn't know is the context I'm writing for. I'm talking to people that work in non-profits or people that work in science organizations, and I know a little bit more about what they exactly want and what they're interested in than ChatGPT does. So I still think that despite the fact that it will be involved, I think, in lots of writing, I believe the thing that will, when I see on LinkedIn people that have taken ChatGPT and posted it without editing it at all, and it's poor. And over time that will become really obvious. The people who put their knowledge into it. It's not, I'm a consultant, I use ChatGPT, but it's when I use my personal knowledge that it actually gives life, I think, to the things I write. And that's ChatGPT gets the bit that doesn't have that, and I do the rest.
So thank you very much. I think we shall all agree that ChatGPT could play the role of this little helper, but we shall keep the creativity for ourselves at the end. Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. It was a wonderful webinar. We started with nearly 1,000 participants, and we reached over 1,500. at some point. So thanks to everyone who joined. I hope you found this very useful. Your CPD certificates will be available within a couple of hours at the IOMP website. And as always, the recording will be available online within 24 hours from now. And please stay tuned to the IOMP website and newsletter for the upcoming webinars. The next one will be on the 12th of September, and it is dedicated to the IOMP corporate members and cancer research. Thank you very much. Enjoy.